Welcome back to the show. Today we're going deep, a real deep dive into the world of languages.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at Arabic and its connections to some really old languages, the Canaanite languages.
Fascinating stuff.
I think so, too.
I'm excited to get into it.
Me too. We've got a bunch of sources for this one, academic papers, excerpts from books about the history of Palestine and the Arabic language, and even an article about Jerusalem as, get this, navel of the world.
Your navel of the world. That's interesting.
All right, so get ready to have your mind blown as we trace these linguistic connections.
It's amazing, isn't it, how much history is hidden within the languages we speak?
Yeah.
I mean, just by looking at how words and grammar have changed over time,
Yeah.
you can uncover so much about migration patterns, cultural exchange, and the legacies of shared ancestry. You know, that's what explains why these languages have so many things in common, especially their triliteral root system. It's like a hallmark of languages.
Okay, now you have to explain that one to me.
Sure.
Trilateral root system.
Sounds complicated, but it's really not.
Okay.
Basically, these languages create words by using roots made up of 3 consonants.
Mm-hmm.
So like in Arabic, you have the root KTB.
Right.
And from that, you can get kataba, which means he wrote, or kitab, which means book.
Wow, so they're all connected to that same root.
Exactly. It's like building blocks for language.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's like a Lego system or something.
You could say that.
Yeah, and get this. Our sources say Arabic has had a massive influence on other languages.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like 70% of Turkish vocabulary and 60% of Persian vocabulary comes from Arabic.
It's remarkable, isn't it? That's a real testament to how far Arabic culture spread through conquests, trade routes, all sorts of interactions.
Right.
And over centuries, that led to this huge exchange of words, of ideas, really enriching the vocabularies of so many languages.
So it's like a ripple effect?
Yeah, like a linguistic ripple effect, spreading out from the Arabian Peninsula.
I like that, linguistic ripple effect.
Oh.
Our sources also mention that Hebrew was influenced by Arabic, too.
That's right, but influence is more in religious and philosophical vocabulary, reflecting the kind of the shared intellectual heritage between those cultures.
Well, that's huge.
Especially within Jewish and Islamic theological traditions.
Fascinating. Now, here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
One source argues that Arabic might be a direct continuation of the Canaanite languages. Not just a distant relative, but like a continuation. Yeah, they present this idea of a linguistic tapestry woven over thousands of years.
That's a really thought-provoking perspective.
Right.
It challenges how we typically think about language categories, moving away from these rigid boxes and acknowledging just how fluid language evolution can be.
So instead of separate branches, it's more like a continuous flow. With Arabic flowing directly from its Canaanite ancestors.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea.
Yeah, that's like those rivers that disappear underground, And then they pop up again later on, same water, just a different path.
I like that analogy.
One of our sources brings up this really intriguing idea of Jerusalem as the navel of the world.
Navel of the world. I've heard that before.
Have you?
Yeah. It's a concept you find in different cultures, the omphalos. It represents the symbolic center, the point where the divine connects with the earth. And when it comes to Jerusalem, it really emphasizes how important the city is as a sacred site. For so many religions, and its significance in religious and historical narratives,
I'm seeing a connection here.
Oh, yeah.
Because our sources say that understanding the term Baka Jerusalem in Arabic is key to grasping the city's sacred nature.
Interesting.
And apparently Baka refers to the mountain of peace.
That makes sense.
Right.
It ties into the whole concept of Jerusalem as the abode of peace.
Yes.
Which is a term deeply rooted in Islamic tradition. And it emphasizes how important Arabic is.
Especially the language of the Quran.
Right, for understanding the spiritual depth of these terms.
And how they connect to Jerusalem's sacredness.
Absolutely.
That's like a linguistic treasure map.
Yeah, I like that.
With the Arabic language guiding us towards a deeper understanding of the city's spiritual significance.
Very poetic.
But it's not just about symbolism, right?
No, definitely not.
This source dives into the history of the Jebusites, the original inhabitants of Jerusalem.
Right, the Jebusites.
And they were a Canaanite tribe.
That's right.
And the source argues that Palestinians today are their direct descendants.
Wow, that's a powerful claim.
I know.
Carrying on the legacy of Canaanite culture in the region.
Exactly. So we're connecting language, history, and cultural identity.
All in one.
In a really powerful way.
It's amazing.
It is.
And it really gets you thinking, about the connection between the Jebusites, the Canaanites, and modern Palestinians.
Yeah.
Because the source argues that by acknowledging this lineage, we can understand the Palestinian connection to the land.
Right, both historically and culturally.
Exactly.
So it's like we're putting together a puzzle with language as one of the key pieces.
I like that.
But if Palestinians are its descendants of the Canaanites, what about the term Palestine itself? Where does that fit in?
Well, the source points out that the term Palestine was actually first recorded by the Phoenicians around 1200 BCE.
And they were Canaanites too, right?
Exactly, another Canaanite people.
So the name has been around for a long time.
Yeah, millennia, long before the modern era.
Wow, so the term Palestine carries so much weight?
Absolutely, it reflects the long history of Canaanite culture in the region.
It's amazing how a single word can hold so much history.
It really is.
But let's zoom in on the languages themselves for a moment.
Sure.
How do linguists actually trace these connections and influences? I mean, we're talking about vast stretches of time here.
Yeah, well, they use all sorts of techniques, almost like detectives piecing together clues.
Okay.
They look at phonetic changes, how sounds have evolved over time. They analyze shifts in grammar, how words are ordered and verbs are conjugated.
Right.
And they study shared vocabulary, looking for words with common roots.
So it's like a linguistic fingerprint revealing the relationships between languages.
Exactly. It's a fascinating field.
Can you give us an example of how this works?
Sure. Take the Arabic word salam.
Which means peace.
Right. And the Hebrew word shalom, also peace. Both words come from the same Arabic cult group.
Showing that they're related.
Exactly. Highlighting how concepts of peace have been expressed in similar ways across these languages for centuries.
That's amazing. Even simple words like peace can reveal these deep connections.
It's true.
Our sources mention something called a table of language similarities.
Oh, yeah, that's a useful tool.
What is that exactly?
It's a way for linguists to visualize the relationships between different languages. It shows the percentage of similarity between languages based on things like vocabulary, grammar, and phonetics.
So the higher the percentage, the closer the relationship.
Exactly. And the table shows pretty clearly that Arabic closest to the Canaanite languages.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it directly evolved from a Canaanite dialect, so it's the most direct descendant.
But the table also shows that even languages that seem unrelated, like Sumerian and Egyptian, have influenced Arabic.
That's right, because languages don't exist in isolation.
It's true.
You have trade routes, conquests, the sharing of knowledge. All these interactions create opportunities for languages to influence each other.
Even across different language families.
Exactly, it's like a linguistic melting pot.
Blending words and phrases from different cultures.
To create something new and unique?
I love that, linguistic melting pot. Our sources emphasize that even though Arabic has evolved over time, it's remained pretty stable, especially in its classical form, Quranic Arabic.
Yeah, that's a common perspective. Quranic Arabic is often seen as a linguistic time capsule.
Preserving the essence of ancient Semitic languages.
Right, and that contributes to its sacredness within Islamic tradition.
So it's not just a way to communicate.
Yeah.
It's a sacred language.
Yeah.
Bearing religious and spiritual significance.
Exactly, and the source goes even further, suggesting that understanding Quranic Arabic is essential for unlocking deeper spiritual meanings.
Like what?
Like the meanings embedded in the names and stories associated with Jerusalem.
Wow, so the language itself holds a key to deeper spiritual understanding.
You could say that.
Especially when it comes to the sacredness of Jerusalem and the concept of the abode of peace.
Precisely.
But there's another aspect to this whole linguistic puzzle that I find really fascinating.
Okay, what's that?
The idea of language as resistance.
That's interesting.
One source argues that for Palestinians holding on to their language, Arabic is a way of resisting attempts to erase their history.
And their connection to the land.
Exactly. It's a powerful statement.
It is. It reflects the deep emotional and political weight that language can carry.
Especially in places where cultural identity is threatened.
Absolutely.
The source even claims that abandoning Arabic would be like abandoning their faith and connection to paradise.
Wow, that's a very strong statement.
It is. It shows how deeply intertwined language, culture, and spirituality can be.
Yeah, especially for people whose identity and heritage have been marginalized or erased throughout history.
It really makes you think about the power of language, doesn't it? It's not just about words. It's about connecting with your history, your culture, your very identity.
It's a lifeline.
Yeah, for some people, it's a lifeline to something much bigger.
Absolutely. Like Sumerian and Egyptian. They haven't evolved in isolation.
Right.
They've interacted, they've influenced each other, they've borrowed words and concepts.
It's true.
And ultimately, they've all contributed to this incredible tapestry of languages that we have today.
Yeah, it's like we've been on an archaeological dig.
A linguistic one.
Exactly, uncovering layers of history and connection through the words we use.
I like that.
And what's amazing is that even languages with more distant relationships, like Arabic and the Canaanite languages, they still have these echoes of a shared past.
Those echoes are powerful. They remind us of the shared human story.
Yeah.
Language evolution tells a tale of migration, of cultural exchange, of the impact of civilizations that may be gone, but their linguistic fingerprints are still there.
And with Arabic, those echoes are particularly strong, especially because of its connection to the Quran.
Right, the language of the Quran is often seen as this linguistic time capsule.
Preserving the essence of those ancient Semitic languages.
Exactly, and that gives it a kind of sacredness.
Connecting modern speakers to this rich heritage.
A spiritual and cultural heritage.
And it also shows how language can be a bridge to a deeper understanding of faith and history.
A bridge, yeah, I like that.
This whole deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
From the triliteral root system to the navel of the world. From the Jebusites to the lasting impact of the Canaanite languages.
So much to unpack.
It's amazing how much is encoded in the languages we speak.
History, culture, spirituality, it's all there.
And it's a reminder that there's always more to discover.
Yeah.
More layers to peel back, more connections to make.
The study of language is an ongoing journey.
It is.
It reminds us that even with our differences, we share a common human story. Oh.
Yeah. Like, where did they really come from?
I'm intrigued already.
We're using work by Dr. Khaled Waleed, and let me tell you, he makes some bold claims.
Bold claims. Those are always interesting. So where do we start with this?
Well, think about the term Semitic languages.
Right, that's usually how these are grouped, like a big family.
Exactly. But Dr. Waleed says, hang on, that might be too simple.
Uh-oh, so he's shaking things up right from the start.
Big time. He says, especially for Arabic, the roots go way deeper.
Deeper than Semitic. That's a big statement. So what's his alternative then?
He thinks Arabic isn't just descended from something old. It's like a continuation, like it's been spoken in that region forever, just changing slowly.
Wow. So not a branch on a tree, but the trunk itself, almost.
You got it. And to understand that, he says, we got to go back to Canaanite languages.
Canaanite. Now, that's not a term you hear every day. Remind me, what's that about?
Think ancient Palestine, Levant area. That's where they were spoken.
Okay, yeah. Historically significant region for sure. But how does that tie to Arabic?
This is where it gets wild. Most folks would put Proto-Semitic at the base of the language tree, right?
Yeah, the ancestor to a bunch, including Hebrew and Arabic, we think.
But Dr. Waleed says, nope. Canaanite might be even older than Proto-Semitic itself.
Well, hold on. He's pushing the timeline back even further. That's a huge claim. Does he have any proof?
He does. It's these ancient writings called Ugaritic inscriptions.
I've heard of those. Aren't those notoriously difficult to decipher?
They are, but they're written in a Canaanite language. And get this, they have roots still used in Arabic today.
So it's like a direct link spanning thousands of years.
Exactly. Like finding a linguistic fossil connecting now and then.
Incredible. It's like Arabic is a time capsule preserving these ancient echoes.
And there are so many examples. One of the coolest is this thing called the triliteral root system.
Oh, yeah. You see that in Arabic, Hebrew, even Akkadian from ancient Mesopotamia, right?
You know your stuff. Basically, it's using 3 consonants as the base for most words.
Can you give an example for those of us who need a visual?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Arabic word kataba means he wrote, right? The root there is KTB.
Okay, I see.
From that, you get kitab, meaning book, katib, meaning writer, even maktab, like an office or desk.
So it's like this underlying structure that ties them all together.
And you find that same system across Hebrew and other related languages.
That is fascinating, like this invisible thread connecting them across time and distance.
It really is. And then there are more obvious word examples too, like peace.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one. Shalom in Hebrew, salam in Arabic, right?
Right, and kitab for book in Arabic, but katuv in Hebrew. Not just coincidence, right?
Definitely not. Points to a deep connection. Makes you wonder if Arabic is this linked to Canaanite. What does that say about people speaking it today? Like, who are they connected to?
Now we're getting into Dr. Waleed's boldest claims. Hold on to your hats, folks.
Okay, I'm ready.
He says straight up, Palestinians today are direct descendants of those Canaanites.
Whoa, that is a bold statement. How does he even back that up?
He uses a bunch of sources, language itself, historical records, the works. One example, he points to the term peliset.
Peliset rings a bell, but I can't quite place it.
It's from ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Dr. Waleed says it links to words meaning like barrister or priest.
Interesting. So positions of authority, knowledge, that sort of thing.
Exactly. He's using language to trace lineage, connecting modern people back to ancient times.
So it's not just about words, it's about identity, heritage.
Right. And he goes even further. He brings up this term Philistine.
Philistine, huh? Never heard of that. What's the story there?
He thinks it originally meant children of the rock.
Children of the rock. That's powerful imagery. What's he getting at with that?
Well, he links it to Jerusalem, suggesting a deep connection between Palestinians and that specific land.
So for him, it's not just language evolving, it's people rooted in a place for millennia.
Exactly. Their language, according to him, is carrying echoes of those ancient civilizations.
Okay, now I'm really starting to rethink how I see Arabic and its whole history.
Me too. But if it's this connected to ancient times, does that mean it's basically stayed the same?
That's a good question, because languages do change, right? So how does that fit with Dr. Waleed's ideas?
That's where we get into the idea of Arabic being what's called a conservative language.
Conservative, meaning what in this context?
It means it's held onto a lot of those old features that other Semitic languages have lost or changed over time.
Wow, so he's saying it's like a window into the past almost.
That's exactly what he says. Like it's this incredible linguistic time capsule.
And he uses that to support his idea that it's not just descended, but a continuation.
That's the core of his argument. But then what are those features that make it so conservative? Give me some examples.
Well, one of the big ones is the verb system in Arabic. It's incredibly complex, right?
Yeah, I remember struggling with that in school. What's the significance of that?
Linguists who study Proto-Semitic, they believe it had a very intricate way of conjugating verbs.
Okay.
And Dr. Waleed says, look, Arabic's system lines up almost perfectly with how we think Proto-Semitic worked.
Like it's held onto this complexity that others simplified over time.
Precisely. For instance, you take that root KTB again, you get so many forms of the verb.
Right, kataba, yaktubu, and tons more. I can't even remember.
Each with its own nuance of time, subject, object, all that. That level of detail is rare in other Semitic languages these days.
So Arabic is like this living museum of how verbs used to work, according to Dr. Waleed.
In a way, yes. But now the question becomes, if it's so resistant to change, how has it survived at all? Languages do change, right?
Exactly. So how does he square that circle? How can something be ancient NED evolving?
Well, he argues that the way Arabic changed is different. It's more about internal development.
Internal development, as opposed
to borrowing heavily from other languages. It's like, imagine a tree, right?
Okay.
It grows taller, branches spread out, but its roots stay put. That's how he sees Arabic.
I like that analogy. So it adapts, but without losing its core identity.
Precisely. And he contrasts this with other languages, which he sees as more open to outside influence.
So it's like they become diluted in a way, less connected to their origins.
It's not about good or bad, really. He just says they took different paths, evolving differently.
And he sees Arabic's path as one that's led to this amazing preservation of the old ways.
Exactly. And he uses this to support his claim that it's not just a descendant, but a continuation.
I'm really starting to see this whole idea in a new light. It's like we've been looking at the family tree upside down.
I think that's a great way to put it. Dr. Waleed's work really challenges us to rethink a lot of assumptions.
This is mind-blowing. But before we go too far, I want to know, how does all this tie back to what he says about the Quran?
Ah, right. Well, he argues that the fact the Quran has stayed in its original Arabic all these centuries.
Yeah.
That's proof of the language's inherent stability. It just doesn't change easily.
So the Quran is like this living example of Arabic's strength, its endurance.
Exactly. It's a powerful argument, and one that really resonates with a lot of people.
This is all so thought-provoking. I'm honestly seeing Arabic in a whole new way now.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore. This is incredible. It's like we've been looking at the family tree upside down all along.
I like that. It really does make you question everything you thought you knew.
Absolutely. And that's what makes these deep dives so much fun, right?
You got it. Always more to learn, more to discover.
Okay, so we've got this foundation now, this idea of Arabic as this ancient, continuous language.
Right. Rooted in the land, tied to a specific people, and remarkably preserved.
Where do we go from here? What else does Dr. Waleed have to say about all this?
Well, this is where things get even more interesting. We've talked about how conservative Arabic is, but there's more to the story. He doesn't just stop at its old end of story. He digs deeper into what that actually means for the language.
Oh, I'm sensing some controversy brewing. Let's hear it.
Well, he makes some comparisons between Arabic and other languages that haven't changed in the same way.
Okay, so buckle up, everyone. Things are about to get spicy.
Well, maybe not spicy, but definitely thought-provoking. He raises some questions about what happens when languages do change a lot.
This should be good. I'm all ears.
Let's dive in. He suggests that Arabic, with all these old features still in place, it gives us a unique view of the past.
Yeah, like we talked about, a time capsule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he sees this as a strength, this conservatism. It's what makes Arabic special compared to others.
If I'm following. So it's like Arabic is this pure stream flowing from way back when, while others are more like
tributaries, all mixed up from different sources.
That's the image. And then he connects this to cultural identity, right?
He does. He says the strength of Arabic, how it's lasted, it reflects on the people who've spoken it throughout history.
So it's not just about the words. It's deeper than that.
Exactly. It's about how language shapes a worldview, how a people see themselves and their place in the world.
And for Dr. Waleed, this is especially strong for Arabic and the Palestinian people, right?
Right. Their language, he says, it's proof they've been there in that region, going all the way back to those Canaanite times.
It's like by speaking Arabic, they're keeping a piece of their ancestors alive, carrying that history with them.
That's a beautiful way to put it. That connection to the past. It's something powerful, don't you think? Absolutely.
It makes you wonder, though, what if those other languages hadn't changed so much? If they'd kept that purity, like Dr. Waleed says Arabic has?
That's a tough question. It gets into how we value different languages, what we consider good or bad about them.
Yeah, like, is one inherently better because it's older? Is that what he's saying?
Dr. Waleed doesn't really use words like better or worse. He's more focused on how they evolved differently.
Okay, so different paths, but not judging one over the other.
Right. He's saying, look, those that borrowed a lot, they might have lost some of what made them unique, their own voice.
So it's not about one being right. It's about seeing the beauty in each approach, the diversity of how they got here.
Exactly. He wants us to see the value in both, those that stayed close to their roots and those that branched out.
This is making me think about Arabic in a totally new way. Like, we've been so busy comparing it, we missed this whole connection to its past.
That's what makes Dr. Waleed's work so interesting. He makes you look deeper, beyond just the surface differences.
You know, it's funny. As we've been talking, I keep remembering all those Arabic grammar struggles I had.
Oh, yeah, those verb conjugations.
It seems so complex, so different. But now I'm wondering, maybe that's because it's so old, it's from those Canaanite roots.
That's a great point. It's like those difficult rules, they're clues telling us a story about where the language came from.
Like little fossils embedded in the grammar itself.
I love that. It makes you want to go back and look at all languages with fresh eyes, doesn't it?
Totally. Like, what secrets are hiding in plain sight just because we didn't know the history?
That's the power of knowledge, right? It opens up whole new worlds of understanding.
And in this case, it's giving me a whole new appreciation for Arabic and its beauty.
That's one of the things Dr. Waleed does so well. He challenges those preconceived notions we have.
Yeah, like we often hear Arabic as poetic. Hebrew is more analytical. I wonder if he talks about that kind of stuff.
You know, he doesn't really get into those generalizations. He seems more interested in showing how they're actually unified.
So he's pushing back against putting languages in neat little boxes with labels.
Exactly. He's saying, let's go deeper, appreciate each one for its own richness, its own way of expressing things.
Like, stop comparing. Start celebrating, basically.
That's a great way to sum it up. And honestly, that's a message we could all use a bit more of these days, don't you think?
Totally agree. You know, I used to be fascinated by this idea of a pure language, like untouched by the outside.
Oh yeah, that romantic notion of something perfectly preserved.
But I'm realizing maybe that's not realistic or even a good thing. Languages are alive. They got to change to survive.
And that evolution is what makes them so fascinating. Each one has its own journey, its own story to tell.
Like the only constant is change.
Right.
Right? Even Arabic, as conservative as it is, couldn't stay completely frozen.
Right. And those points where they do change, those interactions, that's often where the coolest stuff happens.
So it's not about finding some perfect, unchanging language. It's about seeing how they adapted, but still kept those echoes of the past.
You nailed it. Languages aren't static, they're dynamic. They're shaped by the people who speak them, the world around them.
And with Arabic, Dr. Waleed says it's this balance, keeping the old while growing into the new.
That's a key point. It's not about resisting change completely, it's about changing without losing your core.
Like a tree, growing taller, stronger, but still rooted in the same ground it came from.
Perfect analogy. It really captures what Dr. Waleed is saying about Arabic and its legacy.
Speaking of connections, I've been thinking about the Arabic script. It's so different from our alphabet.
Ah, yes. The visual side of language. And this is where another piece of the puzzle fits in. The Phoenicians.
Wait, the Phoenicians? Mm-hmm. Those seafaring traders, what do they have to do with Arabic?
More than you might think. They were another group speaking a Canaanite language, and they were huge for how writing developed.
Hold on, so their writing influenced Arabic, but how?
Well, the Arabic script we see today, it actually goes back to the Phoenician alphabet. It's a long chain of evolution.
Okay, so Phoenicians develop their alphabet, it changes into Aramaic, and then becomes the basis for Arabic.
You got it. It's simplified, of course, but the lineage is there, this written bridge connecting them.
Mind blown. I never realized how connected all these ancient writing systems were.
It's amazing, isn't it? And it shows that language isn't just about what we say, but also how we write it.
And those symbols, the letters themselves, they have their own history, tied to people and cultures moving around.
It's like the letters are telling us their own story, a secret code about how communication spread.
You know, it makes me think of all those English words with Arabic roots, like algebra, algorithm, even coffee.
You're right, and there's so many more. They came through other languages, but the origin is there.
All tracing back to those Phoenician traders, spreading their language and influence everywhere they went.
Exactly. Their impact is still felt today. And it shows that language is this tapestry woven from so many different threads.
This is also fascinating. It's making me realize how much we miss when we just focus on the words themselves.
That's what I love about Dr. Waleed's work. He opens up these new ways of seeing language, connecting it to history and culture.
It's not just about grammar rules anymore. It's about understanding where those rules came from, the stories they tell.
Exactly. And I think that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive, to go beyond the surface and explore the depths of Arabic.
This has been an incredible journey so far. Before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you. If Dr. Waleed is right about Arabic, what about all those other languages that did change a lot? Does that mean they lost something valuable? Do they become less expressive, less connected to their origins?
That's a great question to end on, and it's a complex one. I don't think Dr. Waleed would say they're lesser just because they changed differently.
Okay, so it's not about judging, but more about understanding the different paths they took.
Exactly. He sees value in both approaches, those that held on to the old ways and those that embraced new influences.
Like different strategies for survival, each with its own pros and cons.
Right. And ultimately, it's about appreciating the incredible diversity of language, how each one reflects the world in its own unique way.
I love that. It's not about finding the best language. It's about celebrating all the different ways humans have found to communicate.
Beautifully said. And that's something worth remembering as we continue to explore the fascinating world of language.
Well, this deep dive has definitely opened my eyes to a whole new way of thinking about Arabic and its place in history.
And hopefully it sparks some curiosity in our listeners too.
Before we go, I just want to say thanks for being such a great guide on this journey. I've learned so much, and I'm sure everyone listening has too.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, folks, the journey of linguistic discovery never really ends. Keep those ears open, those minds curious, and who knows what you might find.
You know, it's been amazing focusing on Arabic and this whole idea of it being so ancient.
Right, like almost a direct line back to those early civilizations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder, could this apply to other language families too, not just Semitic ones?
That's a great question. Dr. Waleed is focused on the Middle East, but his way of thinking about language, it could apply elsewhere, couldn't it? Like maybe the way we categorize languages is too rigid.
So maybe there are other Arabs out there, so to speak, languages that have held on to ancient pieces just as strongly.
It's a possibility. I think Dr. Waleed would say, go look, challenge those assumptions. He wouldn't limit this to just one region.
It's like he's giving us a whole new way to see language history, not just as family trees, but deeper connections.
That's a perfect way to put it. He wants us to consider, what if some languages aren't just descendants, but continuations, like carrying that ancient culture directly?
This whole deep dive has been mind-blowing. I feel like I've learned so much more than just facts about Arabic.
It's about how we understand language itself, right? Not just words, but what they tell us about people.
It's not just memorizing grammar anymore. It's like hearing those echoes of ancient civilizations in the way we talk today.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's the beauty of Dr. Waleed's work. He makes you hear those echoes, feel that connection to the past.
It's like language is a thread connecting us to those who came before, carrying their stories and knowledge through time.
That's a beautiful image. And when we start to listen for those stories, it changes how we see the world around us.
Well, I know I'm feeling inspired to keep learning, keep exploring these connections between languages and cultures.
That's the spirit. The journey of discovery never truly ends, right? There's always more to learn, more to uncover.
Huge thanks for being such a fantastic guide on this deep dive. I've learned so much, and I know our listeners have too.
The pleasure was all mine. And for everyone listening, remember, keep your ears open, your minds curious, and you never know what incredible connections you might find out there in the world of language.